So, hi everybody, I'm Belinda Allen and we're going to talk about GP and AI inside of Power BI, particularly Q&A and AI, but there's a lot of artificial intelligence that's natively built into the Power BI desktop that is unbelievably easy to use and unbelievably powerful. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. First though, as usual, and forgive me for not doing the slide deck the way most people do. I do it the lazy way here, so I could go back and forth. But I want to thank Marlena and Haley and all the people at DexPro for giving me a platform in which to share information about Power BI. So thanks so much, guys. And before we get started, I want to talk about some upcoming sessions that are going to happen. This is a big topic we're doing today, and I'm not going to rush through it. If we do not get all the way through the content, we're going to make this part one, and then we're going to go ahead and finish it next month with part two. I'll try to find a good logical stopping point, but we'll break it up then. But on the chance that I get all the way through it, next month, we're going to actually be talking about, on February 18th, the query editor modeling. And we're going to do the general ledger information. We're going to spend more time focused on doing data modeling inside the query editor so that you could get a lot of your information out. And it's going to include things like aggregating the payroll so you don't see the detail of the payroll. And it's going to be able to give us something that we can look at unposted transactions and maybe the approval status of them if you have the approval status turned on, and posted and historical transactions and how we can use that information then to build some really cool visuals. And then the month following that, we're going to dig into the fiscal year setup inside of GP. And with that, we're going to take the data modeling information we do in the GL one, and then we're going to add some of the data information to it so we could do some time intelligence pieces like year over year, month over month, quarter over quarter, growth percentage, and so forth. So you could do a lot of things. By doing that in the data modeling with DAX, you could take advantage of some of the AI pieces we're going to be talking about today and use that. So for example, you could say over year growth, what caused our growth? Like, let's look at where the variances of different regions perhaps, or different items added to our growth, because sometimes you don't know what to ask. So we're going to let AI help us ask some of those things. And then we're going to be doing just in a few weeks, a hands-on course. And it's going to be very similar to the next two sessions, but it's going to be hands-on and it's going to be in detail. So check out DexPro for that and reach out to them and let them know if you're interested in attending the course. We will all work together. It'll be a small course so that everybody can feel comfortable and we could be interactive, but it's going to be live training on your GP data, so that you could start building out everything as we go along. So it should be a lot of fun. All right, so our agenda today, we're going to use SOP data to connect to, and we're going to go through a lot of AI, particularly Q&A, and I'm calling it Q&A tooling because I want to explain a little more about Q&A. We're going to talk about how you explain the increase and the decrease, how to look at trend reports and look and see what's going on with the trends. And then there are the ones that use Microsoft machine learning natively built into the Power BI desktop, and that would be key influence visuals, the decomposition tree, which is my favorite all-time visual inside of Power BI, anomaly detection, which is new and still in preview, and smart narratives. And that's kind of a really cool thing too. It's also in preview. The two preview ones, they may change as we go along, but they're pretty darn powerful. So we're going to start with Q&A and Q&A tooling. So what is Q&A? Q&A is using natural query language like you do when you go to Bing or Google and you type in a question and you get results from internet searches. Well, we could do the same thing in Power BI on our data set. So we could type in a question inside of Power BI on our data set, and we can get results back from our data. And the results that we get back are usually, almost always, because it's going to have to use a visual in the form of a visual. And then we could even train it and extend it a little bit more. So before we move on, let's go ahead and connect to our data. So let me pull up. I have a blank Power BI report pulled up automatically. And there we go. Okay, so I'm going to connect to GP data, and the GP data I'm going to connect to is, it looks like, okay, there we go. The GP data I'm going to connect to is sales order processing transactions, particularly the line items. I'm interested in looking at the line items, and that's what we're going to use to do some questions or do some analytics on using artificial intelligence. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Get Data. And because this is GP data, I'm going to go to Database, and I'm going to go to SQL Server, and I'm going to choose Connect. Now, what I'm building out today, I'm going to share with you guys. So when it comes up like this, rather than typing in my SQL Server in my database, I've set up parameters for these, and it's just so I can make it easier to share. But normally I'd put in the name of my SQL Server instance, which happens to be BusyBee. That's the name of my server, and my company ID, which in this case I'm using two. I'm using the Fabricam one. If you're not sure what those two things are, you could talk with your partner, and someone from DexPro can help guide you on that. And I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And just like we've seen in the past sessions, I'm going to get my navigator list here, which shows all the tables, views, and stored procedures. And we've gone through that before, so I'm not going to go into detail about it. I'll type in line to do a search to get my sales line information. And I do not see it. Oh, there it is, sales lines. I'll click on it to highlight it to make sure that is the one I want. I can see a preview of the data set, and there are so many columns, it's only showing one, but I can see the item number, and that looks like the one I want. So I'm going to go ahead and just select that sales line one, and then excuse me, and then I'm going to click on transform data. So I open up the query editor, and this is where that next lesson we get into, where we're going to spend a lot of time doing analysis. But a couple things I want to point out to you. If I zoom in at the bottom, you can see I have 564 columns. So that's an out-of-the-box view that comes with GP, and I do not want to see 564 options to create visuals with. I know I do not need that many, so I want to narrow it down. And it's also showing me I'm only seeing 199 rows, and that's because I have so many columns. Normally you see the first 1,000 rows, but you're only going to see so much information in the preview. So I'm going to first do my Belinda's 3 rules. The first thing I typically do is I change the name of my query. So over on the right side of the screen, I'm going to change the name to something that makes sense. So sales line items make sense, but I'm going to put spaces in between it. And the reason I'm putting spaces in between it, one of the first things we're going to do today is talk about the Q&A model. And nobody's going to type in sales line items for that, so I'm going to manually type in sales line items. Okay, so let me zoom back out. The next thing I want to do is reduce the number of columns I have, and that's Belinda rule number 2, get rid of any unnecessary columns. So on the home ribbon in the query editor, I'm going to choose columns, and I don't want to unmark 500 plus columns. So I'm going to unmark all of them and just keep the ones that I want. So I want the SOP type, where it is back order, fulfillment, invoice, and so forth. And I'm just going to select a few. So the SOP number, which would be like the invoice number, the item number, the item description, the quantity. I want to get the extended cost, the extended price. I want to get the customer number. And let's see what else I want to get. I think we'll leave it at that. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and leave it at that. We're going to pretend that none of them are voided. Oh, let me get status. Let me come in. I'm going to get, well, I'm going to pretend none are voided, so we're going to skip that one for right now. But I'll go ahead and get the posting status. and the document status. And those are two different things inside of GP in this particular view. The document status, if it is considered unposted, or we often call it open, but technically it would be called work, an unposted sales order processing transaction, if it is that open status, meaning you go to sales transaction window and you can pull it up, it's going to say unposted here. So if you have an order and you turn that order into an invoice, once the order turns into an invoice, it becomes history. So the document status will then read that it is posted at that point. But an order doesn't actually get posted to the system. So an order will always read unposted in the posting status column. The posting status column will only change if you post a return or an invoice, and that could be a fulfillment invoice or a regular invoice. So that's the only time that's going to change. So this is going to tell us if the invoice is posted or unposted, but this one is going to tell us if it is an order, for example, is posted or unposted. So what I want to do is I want to narrow it down to only be returns and invoices, and then I could go ahead and eliminate the document status line. So I'm going to come into right here, and normally you don't see all of them. So you might have to, if you have like, I don't know, 10,000 invoices and 3 credits, the credits might be below that 1,000 item threshold, so you might not see all of them. And so you might need to use text filter then in that particular scenario. But I could see all of them here. So I'm going to go ahead and just say invoice, return, and I'm going to use fulfillment order because that could also be an invoice. And then I'll click OK. So now I've narrowed down the scope of that. Now, if I come over here, I no longer need the document status, so I can remove that particular column. This is just a little bit of data modeling that we have going on. Now, I'm going to go back over here for a moment. I want to get rid of returns because we're going to pretend returns don't exist. Normally, you would model the data so that we see the returns as negative numbers. And I'm not going to go through that one right now, so I'm just going to come up and oh, you know what I'll do? I will copy that over and I'll just do it now. So let me do the Belinda's third rule. I verify the column type for everything. Text, 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 text. Oh, did I get the date? I did not get the date. So let me come back up here and get the date of the transaction. So date, and I think it's going to be here, the original transaction date, or is it called document date? Document date, there we go. Okay, so I got the document date. Come back down here. That's why I use that remove column, so I can come back and add something. So let me set the date to just be date. So I have my date, and then I have my posting status. Okay, so all of that looks really good. I'm going to leave everything as it is for right now, but I want to be able to get returns separately. So I'm going to change this to invoice line items. And now I want to get credits out. So first I'm going to come in here and I'm going to remove the returns. And then I'm going to right mouse click on the invoice line items on the left. And I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to rename this to credit or return line items. This is a little Belinda cheat. Okay, so now I have my return line items. So on that last filter, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to say equals returns. So now I'm only seeing my returns here. And then what I could do to quickly reverse the sign on these 3 columns is highlight one column at a time, go to transform, go to, since it's a number, a decimal number, right here in the column area, I have the ability to choose standard because it's a number. So I'm going to say, whoops, did not want to add. And I'm getting you drunk a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to choose to multiply, and I'm going to multiply it times a -1, which will reverse the sign. And then I'm going to do the same with my extended cost. Go to standard, multiply, and multiply times -1, which will reverse that sign. And then I'm going to do the same for extended price. And this is a good, quick, and dirty way to be able to do this. Multiply it times -1. And now that I have all of those negatives, I have my invoice and my return lines. So now I want to combine these two back together, these two queries. They have all the same columns and the column types are all the same. So I could just stack them on top of each other in one new query called append. So I'm going to click on the Home tab, and then once again in the top right, I'm going to go to append. Now, I don't want to click on the words because it would try to append one on top of, I would be taking, in this case, the returns and adding in the invoices. I'm going to click on the drop down and append queries as new. And when I do that, I'm just doing two tables together, the return lines and the invoice lines. And once I click OK, I'm going to have a brand new third query that I could call, I'm just going to call it my sales items. Now, with that, I have extra fields here, or extra tables, and I don't want that to be part of my data model. So what I'm going to do, over here on the left, I'm going to select the invoice first, right mouse click, and I'm going to unmark enable load, but I'll keep the include in report refresh mark. And what that's going to do for me is it will not load these two in the data from these two in the memory file. But when they combine them in the sales file, it will be loaded in my memory, my in-memory data model. And then these are my two parameters, so you could just ignore those for now. So now I have my sales line items all in one big file. Now I'd like to add some customer information, so I can add that in. So I'm going to go back and connect on a new source. And when I do this, go back to database, SQL Server database, and I'm going to grab the parameters I put in instead of typing in. Now, normally, if you haven't logged in to your SQL Server database yet, when you do that, you then would be prompted to key in your credentials, but it'll remember them from that point forward. So I'm interested in my customer file, so I'm going to grab customers and then click OK. And once I do this, I'll have my customer files. The name's fine. I don't need to change the name from customers to anything else, but I have 182 columns, so I want to clean that up. So I'll go to choose columns. I'm going to unmark all and just keep the columns I want. The customer number, the customer name. I'm going to keep the address, line, city, state, zip. I also want to get the salesperson. I'm just going to get the salesperson off the customer file. So I got the salesperson ID, and let's see, what else would I like? Oh, customer class. I want to get the customer class. That's great. And I think that's good for the customer. And then finally, I'll check the fields for each one, and they look good. Now I'm going to link on the customer number. So I'm going to right mouse click and choose transform and trim. So if there's any blank spaces at the end, they will not appear. I'm just trimming that off. So I'm going to go back to the sales line. I'm going to do the same for the customer over here. So where's the customer number? Here it is. This time I'll walk you through it the longer way. I'm going to go to transform because I want to transform that column. I'm going to go to format. Click on that drop down, and I'm going to choose trim. And that way, when I create a relationship between those two, they will work together. All right, so that's all said and done. And actually, while I'm here, I want to go ahead and get the item class as well. So I'm going to, on the sales line, whoops, I'm going to have to come back up to these, and I'm going to have to get the item class. I should have got that while I was doing this a little earlier. So got the item class, and let me come over to the return lines and do the same here. Should have did this beforehand, and get the item class. Okay, cool. And I'm going to come back to customers and get one more thing. I'm going to get the type of customer. which is user-defined field 1. So doesn't show up under type, but there it is, user-defined field 1. And in the Fabricam database, we call this type. Okay, everything, whoop, didn't mean to insert a step. Come down here, would have been okay if I did, but that's okay. All right, now I've got my data set for myself. So I'm going to click on home and close and apply. So this is the data model that we've set up. The only thing I have left to do is come in and add a relationship between the two. So I'm going to come in here, and it automatically found a relationship, and if I hover over it, it's based on the customer number. So this is good, and I could see it's a many to one relationship. I could see the star right there and the 1, and that indicates that customers can only exist in the customer maintenance one time, but there could be many lines for a customer in the sales line items. So now that we have all that set, what I'd like to do is come into the report zone, and we're going to start building out a report. Now, I'm not going to start with visuals this time. I'm going to start with Q&A. Now, you could add the Q&A visualization a couple of different ways. One way you can do it, and I'm going to start by coming up to the top and clicking on Insert. And as you can see, there are some AI visuals located right here. And this is where I'm going to start. And these are 4 of the ones we're going to be looking at. And I'm going to start with Q&A. And I could tell already we're going to run over. So we'll be doing this in in a couple different sessions, over 2 different sessions. So we'll be finishing up this next month. But what it does is it tries to come up with questions for me. And if I click on show questions, I could see all of the questions. It said, hey, I think these might be things that people want to ask. So if I wanted to compare quantity to extended cost, for example, I could click on that, and a visual is going to appear on the screen telling me, hey, here's your quantity and here's your extended cost. Now, I could see the blue underline for these because these are actually fields in my system. So if I were to change this to compare quantity and customer class, then there we go, customer class. Now I'm looking at an entirely different thing. So you could type in whatever question you want. Now I still have my handlebars around this visual, and if I were to come over to the visual pane, you could see the Q&A visual is one of the visuals that's listed on here. It looks like a little cartoon talking bubble. But this is basically how it works. Now, if this is a visual I want to keep on my report, all I have to do is click on this icon up here, and it will turn this Q&A into a standard visual. So now it is a bar chart visual, and if I come over here, you can see the clustered bar chart is the visual that it's using. So you could literally create a page of visuals for someone if they don't know what they want to see, but they know, oh, you know, I know I want to look at sales data, but I don't know what I want to see. One of the things you could do is just simply come in and add like 4 of these and say, all right, just make them whatever way you want to make them. And I'm going to just stack them up here. I'm using copy and paste. And now you have 4 separate visuals. Let's put a background on here so we can see them. And there you go. All right. So I have 4 separate visuals on here. Boy, I didn't line that up very well, did I? Okay. That I can actually create visualizations off of in my system. Let me, sorry, I'm a little bit of a freak. Okay. Now, I have some options available to me. Now, normally I tell people when you're modeling your data, and let's go back and look at our data. We're looking at customers here. When we're modeling our data, we want the column names to be something that makes sense. Don't try to do programming things and leave no spaces in it. You want to make it be something that someone is going to use when they type in a question. So for example, if the address, we don't call it address 1, we don't type that in. Maybe we don't call them salesperson, maybe we call them consultants. Then we want to type that in as well. Now, If that doesn't work for us and we don't get that in, there are some ways that we can create synonyms for things. But let's go through and do another Q&A right here. So I'm going to say, show our best customers. Now, it's like, I don't know what you mean, show our best customers, show our best customer names. What do I want to see? I'm going to go with names, but it still doesn't know what our best means, right? It doesn't get what that is. So it's red and it's underlined. Let me come in and again and say, show customer, let's see, let's show extended price. And this is why you'd want to change that name, because you might actually, let's actually type that in. Show sales by customer name. All right, so here it's like, I don't know what you mean by sales. So we've got this red and this underline. And what we're going to do is come in and open up this tooling option right here. And when I see this gear up here, when I see the gear, I can hover over it and you can see it says teach Q&A to understand people better. So they don't understand what I mean by sales. And by sales, I mean extended price. So I'm going to click on this gear and the Q&A tooling window will open. And I can do certain things. And one of the things I want to do is teach this phrase, sales. So I went to teach Q&A, it put in my question. It's like, I don't understand what you mean by sales. So when I type in sales, what does it refer to? And now I could come in and say it refers to extended price. Okay. So now I've got it where it's referring to extended price. Let me zoom out. And this is what the result will end up looking like. So when I type in sales, it knows I mean extended price. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And then now when I come back up here, it's going to rework my visual so that now I can see that particular visual because it gets sales means extended price. So that's one way I can go about making a change to my Q&A right here. So this is, I think this is really an amazing thing because we're using natural language to ask questions about our data as opposed to creating specific visuals. And this is really very important. And if I come back into, let's say I want to be able to set my own questions. I don't like the ones that they have here. If I go back in, I could come over here and I can put in my own suggested questions. So show customers, sales by customers. That would be one of my questions. And that looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and put in customer names and I'll add that. So that's now one of my questions. The next question I want to add is what items have the highest quantity in sales? Now I misspelled quantity for one thing. So let me come over here and type it in like that. Now quantity, it still doesn't get quantity. So let me come in and let me just put in regular quantity and see if I can get that in. Yeah, that works. Show items that have the highest quantity in sales. So there they are. And I'm going to go ahead and add that one in. So you could add in questions that people have. Once you click save, then when you come back in, now you're going to see the questions that you've prepared for them. And if you, the ones that were there are gone once you enter in the first one. So show fewer, show more. You're looking at all of them because I only have 2 right now. But now you could come in and click on those. And you could change the order in which they appear if you want. So you could continue to add questions. Now, as we go back into that, we could also set fill synonyms here as well. So I'm going to open up the sales items, and we had the word, one of the columns was QTY for quantity. Well, I'm going to come in and add the word quantity and go ahead and click. And I'm going to click on add again. And now you can see it's coming up with additional options. And the reason why it does this just like Bing, if you type in town, Bing gets that you mean city. Or if you type in city, it gets you could also mean town. And that's what we're doing here. It's coming up with ideas for us, and we could come in and say, oh, some of these don't work for me. So for example, the posting prestige, that doesn't work for me, so I'm going to get rid of that one. But this is how you would do that so that you could add other fields in here as well. All right, so this is where we can add some other synonyms. You also could go back and review questions, and it looks at across all of your database so that you could see any questions you have. These are some of my data sets that are up in the cloud, so I can review questions. If somebody's asked a question that's been used a lot, it only shows me like the last 28 days. I can then monitor it or fix it if I need to fix the question. And then again, I have the ability to manage some terms. These are the ones that I created, so I could see my terms here. So that's what this is all about, the ability to add our own Q&A and answer some of those Q&A questions for us. You could even go in and say, show top 10 items by quantity. And this should only reveal my top 10 items. I should only see 10. And that looks okay. I'm going to say by quantity and price. Sales. I was hoping I'd get something a little bit different there. But under the customer, if we even came in and modeled some of this data, like I'm going to take state, and when I click on state, I then am at the column tools, and I'm going to categorize this as a state or province. So I could come in now and type in show sales for Minnesota. And it goes through and it looks only at the state of Minnesota. So you can see it's 266,000. I'm going to change that to California. And now it's California wasn't there. Minnesota, what other state is there? North Dakota, I think, is there for sure. And no, what other state was there for the state of, I shouldn't need to type that in. Let's say for New York. Okay. Minnesota, Wisconsin. There we go. All right. Finally found one that had some data. Okay, so you could type that in. So now I've not only looked at across all of my queries, but I've looked in columns and I've looked inside of the individual fields themselves, because I'm reaching this in here. And now I could say show sales that are unposted, because unposted was one of the options I had in my system. So show sales and SOP number that are unposted. And now I could see my sales by SOP number that are unposted. So you could keep asking it questions, and anywhere you see it underlined, that's where you could click on. You could add a different field. So this is by show sales and SOP number. Now I'm going to say show sales and customer. Let me get rid of SOP here. By customer that are unposted, so that I could actually see all of those. So that is a little bit about Q&A and some of the things Q&A can do. And I'm not even going to try to rush through this, so we'll keep going. So in Q&A, it's using Bing again to manage those. And you're probably going to want to get the slide deck at the end so that you can have all of the notes, because there are a lot of slides in here and I'm not going to go through all of them. But some of the things that you want to know, you want to make sure you get your column names where there's something logical in your own company's language, your own company's terminology. Otherwise, you're going to have to go in and change the synonyms. And changing synonyms are okay, but you're not going to want to do it each and every time. Oh, and another place you could change synonyms, if I go back to the relationship field and I come in and I say, okay, see address 1 here, I'm going to click on this, and then over on the right, I have a synonym option. And I'll just put in a comma, and I'm going to type in street address. And now I have a synonym for my street address. So there are a couple different ways you can get those synonyms in, but I would start by making the column something that makes sense as part of your data modeling procedures. So get rid of the blank spaces, show consultant. Don't keep your data as in much detail as you can so that you could do that. And then sometimes you're going to want to mark the year as a whole number that does not summarize, so it doesn't try to add up your years. So if you say by year, it's not summarizing the year. So you want to make sure that you go in. For example, let me come in right in here first. I'm going to go to sales. I'm going to get the date column, which is right here. First, I'm going to, let me come up and do a couple things. When I highlight the date column, it takes me to column tools. I want to format the date, so I'm only seeing the date in the format we're used to seeing it in. And I'm going to go ahead and get the year as well. So to do that, I'm going to go to Table Tools, and I'm going to add a new column. This is using DAX. We haven't talked much about DAX yet. When we talk about dates in 3 months from now, it will, we'll get into that a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and just extract the year out. DAX is very similar to Excel. But you want to be careful that you get your dates marked appropriately and that the date fields get done right. So I've got this date column now, or year column. Now with the year column highlighted, back at column tools, it's a whole number, but it's set to summarize automatically for me as a default, and I don't want it to do that. So for that date only, I'm going to say don't summarize it. So if I use the date column, or the year column, it will not summarize the year. Instead, it'll just display the year. So that's a little bit about my date, and let's come back in here. So there are a couple of best practices that are involved in getting good Q&A. And I like to take the time going through the best practices for Q&A because it is also the best practices for all of the AI inside of Power BI. So we want to make sure we sort our columns in ways that make sense. So months, we'll talk about that more in a couple of months, but you could sort your months chronologically instead of alphabetically. So we don't want April 1st, we want January 1st if we're on a calendar year. And then we need to do something in our modeling called normalizing the data. And we're going to be spending a lot more time on this when we do the query editor piece for the general ledger data. We're going to normalize that data. And sometimes you need to denormalize it. So let's get into what I mean by normalizing data. First of all, again, Q&A refers to unique things. A unique thing can be a whole query, it could be a column of a query, or it could be a single field of a query. And so we need to make sure that we have all those unique things named properly and we have the synonyms for them correct. We also want to make sure that we enter things in names that make sense to the way people will type in the questions. And we want to do some unions to eliminate, this should actually be partitioning. Look at there, Linda, she's nuts today. So instead of sales for all cities, we could do a sale by each city, and we want to make sure that the queries are appropriate. So let's get into what these things mean a little bit more. So when we, see I have it right here, when we are working on normalizing our data, one of the things we may want to do is eliminate partitioning. So on the left, we have a list of book tours. So we have our tour column. We have 3 different tours we have that each represent a different book and have a different author. But each author is going to 3 different cities. And notice there's 3 columns for the cities. Well, to normalize the data here, this is partitioning. And we do not, if we say city, it won't know which city to look at. So we want to take this and divide it into 2 queries so that the cities are listed in one query along with what tour date it is, and then everything else is in another one. And we could do that doing our data modeling. So that is how we eliminate partitioning. Then we also want to eliminate property bags. So over on the right this time, if you see the property bags, we have 2 records here, and each record has 4 pieces of information. So there's a total of 8 rows. So for customer 1, there's the age, there's the marital status, there's the gender. And instead we want to make it so that we're looking at our customers and each of those unique things that have a property. The value is listed in the grid, but the property is listed as a column. And so we can, a lot of times that's just transposing, but we need to do that. That's called property bags, something we want to get rid of. Another thing on the right is sometimes you need to split columns. So here we have a customer and we have a full address in a column. And maybe we want to have a column with the full address. That's perfectly fine. But over on the left, we're breaking it down so we have street, city, and the country all separate. And this is also going to benefit us if we go through and want to categorize those as geography in this particular case, so that we can map it out better. This is definitely going to map it out better. And it'll also provide better information if we were to go in and say, all right, I want to see what all the sales are for my customers in London. And then sometimes people will have multiple values within the same cell. So here we have works, musical works. So we have the individual ID for the musical work. We have the name and the genre of the work. And then we have the composers. And the composers are broken up only by a comma. Well, if we want to get to that data, we need to break that out separately, just like we did with the cities in the first one on the book tour. So we could divide that up as part of our data modeling. And then denormalizing the data. Sometimes we need to do the opposite and denormalize it. So in the white box here, we have airline flights, and we have an arrival airport and a departure airport. Well, if we try to make one query just for airports, then you're going to run into the issue of, which link is going to be active? Because I can only have one active relationship at a time between 2 queries. Do I want it to be the departure airport, or do I want it to be the arrival airport? And my links aren't lined up exactly right. So in this particular case, we probably want to bring the airport ID in for the departure airport ID and the arrival airport ID, so that we have those set up and as something unique inside of the list here. So that's denormalizing data. So that's a little bit about our Q&A and how we can get some of our Q&A going. So I'm going to come in again. Actually, let me delete this page. I'm going to duplicate this one and come in and make a little change here. All right. So this time I'm going to come in, I'm going to add in a clustered column chart. We're going to make it really big. I want to talk about something called insights. So on my clustered column chart, I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab, let's say I'm going to grab customer number, and we'll put it in the axis. And then I'm going to grab that extended price and put it in the values. Okay. So now I have this list here. This looks like a bit much. Let me get rid of customer price instead, and I'm going to grab that year column. Instead, we'll put the year in. Okay, this is good. Now, as I'm looking at the year, I could see changes inside of, I could see changes, like there's no data in 2025. 2026, there's a big increase over 2024. 2027 has a big increase, and 2028, the bottom falls out of the sky. And maybe I want to know why. Maybe we're just starting 2028, and that's why that's that way. But what caused this big growth between these 2 years? I want to know what caused it. So we're going to use something called insights for that. And insights do and explain the increase or explain the decrease for us. And we have the option either to explain that or find out where the differences are. And I want to point out that this preview is considered in preview. It's been out there for a while, but it is subject to change. And it does use some machine learning algorithms to help us figure out what's going on. And it's going to populate this pop-up window that comes up, and the pop-up window is going to give us certain pieces of information. And the goal is just to compare 2 periods that are side by side, or 2 columns that are side by side. So whatever column you're looking at, it will immediately get to the column on the left to see where the difference is. And the default visual is a waterfall visual. And I'm not going to get into all of the different visuals here. You could get the slide deck to do that, but let's take a look at it in action. So I have I'm going to zoom in here. I have my cursor over this 2027 year. And if I right mouse click, I get this analyze option. And in analyze, I have two options: explain the increase or find out where the distribution is different. It sees that there is a big increase from 2027 to 2026. That's why it knows, hey, explain the increase. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And this pop-up window will appear. Let me zoom out. And the pop-up window is trying to help me explain. It's not going to let me move it around. So let me zoom a little bit. There we go. It's giving me the analysis between those 2 years. So it's analyzing the extended price between 2026 and 2027, and it sees that there's an 83.79% increase. And now I can see specifically the increase. So this is how many more unposted transactions we have compared to how many more posted transactions we have. And if you hover over it, I can see the values from 2026 and the values from 2027, and I could see the change in those. So for the posted ones, there was only a 40% increase, but for unposted, it was significantly higher. So in 2026, there was only $19.90 unposted at the end of the year, where we had $157,000 plus unposted at the end of this year. And to change, you get a bunch of options here on ways you could look at it. Here I'm looking at it by items. It's telling me specifically these two items account for the majority of the increase in the column called item number. So it's getting very specific and letting me know. And then it's also telling me, okay, those offset the decrease for this one. And then it's just telling me which columns change the most, which items change the most. And I could see this visual right here. So I could see here is like the total from 2026, and I could see the increase of these items that it's referring to. And that leaves me where I am with the total for 2027. So for when I'm comparing the two, 2026 takes me to right about right here, and then there's that HWCAAC right there, and then the soft, and then it goes all the way up, and then I can see some of these decreases as well. And we have a couple of different options. We could look at a scatter chart where we could see like the average line right here, and then we could see things that are increased versus decreased, and then we have some other line stacked bar charts. I'm not a big fan of those. And a ribbon chart. And the more data you have, the harder it is to see in the ribbon, but you get the point here. And again, if this is something that you like, you could simply add it to your visual by clicking on, just to click add. And then Microsoft is looking for feedback, so you can give them an up or down if you're interested in that as well. So now I've got on my visual right here, I can see this particular one as well. So if I were to look at this one, let's come back in and zoom, and I right mouse click again, and I go to analyze. This time it's asking me about explain the decrease. I'm going to go to the distribution differences this time, and this one looks a little bit different. So I'm looking at in the gray areas, this is my total extended price. And then now it's showing me the extended price for the components that it's listing. So I could see how they compare, the distribution of these compared to other items. So if I don't want to see them in proportion with each other, I could unremove that. And now I can see these are actual numbers. So these are actually where the sales for these items are. But relatively, I can see, all right, 2026 grew, 2027 grew a lot, and it's telling me that this extended price that's listed right here is far exceeding where we are in relation to the years. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with this, and this is actually, once again, using the Microsoft machine learning without us having to know what the heck algorithm is, or even how the algorithm works for us. So I think that's pretty nifty. And I can already tell now we're going to have to keep our journey for the remainder of the few months here. So or into next month. So let me come back into where I was on insights. Let's see. I did the demo. We went through all those. And we do have time to show you trends, a trend line. And a trend line is a visual, it gets added to your visualization, and it has to, there's a lot of different lines we could add. We could add in a constant line, a max line, average, and so forth. And so let me go ahead and show you a demo of a trend line. So let's duplicate this, get rid of this one, and I'm going to stretch this out. I am going to change this to a line chart, and I'm going to take out the year, and I'm going to change this to the full date, the document date. All right, so I'm looking at across many years, and I could see my trend. And actually, let's do this. Let's just show a couple of years. So I'm going to show 2027 and 2028. So here are my, actually, let's just show 2027. All right, so here are my trends for the months that have data. The Fabricam company, doesn't have a whole lot of data in it. But I want to see my trend line. So what I'm going to do to add a trend line in, over on the visualization pane, which is also where we manage our visual, I've got the visual selected. You can see I have my handlebars around it. And I can see the visual has the little box around it up here. This is where we set our fields. We know that. This is where we could format our fields, for example, adding a border around it and do some other important visual pieces. So I'm going to not get into formatting right now. But we also have this analytics option here. And this is where we could add all of those lines. So we're going to talk about everything down to forecast. So I'm going to open up the trend line and add in a trend line. And on my trend line, I'm going to use a dashed style. Let me change the color to purple so it stands out a little better. Actually, let me change it to a solid. And then I've got the transparency set to 0. So let me zoom out. And now I can see my trend line a little bit. And on my trend line, it looks like it's going up slightly, but let's narrow down a little bit further. So on my document date, I'm going to come in and say, let's do some advanced filtering. I'm going to say is on or after or on or before. Let's do April 30th, 2027. I already have the year narrowed down. So I'm going to apply that filter. And now I can see a little more that my trend line is going up on my sales. So slowly but surely my sales are getting better and better over that first 4-month period. If I were to come in and add another one, is on or after, let me put in just the month of April. Looks like for April, though, our trend line is going down. So our sales are going down. So this is a way you could add a trend line in to your system. So let me come back to my slide deck. Couple things. You have to do it on a line chart. It's the only one you could add a trend line to. And you could use the x-axis or the y-axis and do some shading. Some of the other lines you could use, the area chart, clustered bar chart, you could add the constant line, the min, max, average, but not the trend line. The trend line has to be on a line only. And you could even do a percentile one as well. And then there are some visual limitations. I'm not going to get into what they are, but I'm going to list those out, the ones that it absolutely will not work with. And again, the trend line, you have to do time data. It has to be over time, which makes sense when you go to talk about that. Before I do anything else, before we wrap up, because it's almost time, I want to add a forecast on here as well. So I'm going to get rid of my trend line because I can't have both at the same time. So I'll just X that out. But also under analytics, let me zoom in, is forecast. So I'm going to open up forecast. I'm going to add a forecast. And I'm going to say go out, in this case, 10 points. And the higher your confidence level, the bigger the boundaries are going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave that as is, and I should be okay on my forecast. So let's come back in and zoom out. Whoop, why did I lose my forecast? Let's come back in, 10 points. Oh, 10 days. There we go. And apply. No forecast. Let me get rid of this one and let me make it 1 month. See if we can 1 month get the forecast in. All right. Let's decrease the confidence level. Come on. Well, not sure why I'm not being able to see. Oh, data is too irregular to forecast. Okay. Sample data is just not that good to do that with. But normally you'd see this little forecast option in there. And it's going to come up with what it sees as the high boundary or the low boundary. And then once it does that, then it'll give you the forecast in between so that you can kind of get an idea. And again, the lower the confidence level, the bigger the area is. But again, this data is too irregular. Maybe if I come in, let me try something else here. We'll say is on or after 4/1/2027 and on or before 4/10/2027. And let me apply that. That might not be enough data. Nope, not enough data. We'll try everything. All right, nope, that's, let me go out. Ooh. 7 days, see if that'll, nope, still not enough data, too irregular. Okay, but this is how you would add in a forecast. If you wanted to add a forecast in, I'm going to close that out. I'm going to put my trend line back in. We'll just add that back in. I could add a minimum line if I wanted to. I'm going to make that one red. And I could add a maximum line if I want to. I'm going to make that green. And you could see all the different options you have available to you so that you could see the min, the max, and the average and kind of work your, oh, let me add an average and work our way through it. So you could do a lot of really cool things. There's a median line. The average will make purple. All right, so we got all kinds of lines in here. All right, so you can see we hit the average right around in here somewhere in this particular time period. So one of the things I've been doing with COVID data is for our own county is I look at like the last 7 days and I put a trend line on that. So I could tell automatically if our trend is going up over the last week or if our trend is going down. So that's something that I personally do. I'm going to jump to the end for right now. We have a lot of other areas that we will want to get into because we just did not even touch the surface. But if you want the slide deck now and you want to get a template of the data I have in what I've created so far in here, then here is the link. It's the same link we've been using all along. You just need to let me know, and it gives you an option to ask some additional questions as well. I don't know, Haley, was there any additional questions in there? Did anybody have questions?
We did not have questions today.
Okay. Well, I had more data than we could cover, which is a cool thing because that leaves a lot of really cool topics for us to cover next month then. So next month, instead of doing the general ledger piece, we're going to go through and cover 4 different areas: key influencers, the decomposition tree, the anomaly detection, and the smart narratives. I'm going to use the same sales order processing data that we have listed here, and hopefully I'll be able to achieve those. If we don't get enough data, then I have some other sample files that we can use and bring those in. So we will wrap up. This is now AI part 1, and next month will be AR part 2, and we'll move the general ledger one to the month beyond that. So very good. I would like to thank once again DexPro for giving me an opportunity. So thank you, Marlena. Thank you, Haley. I appreciate that a lot.
Well, thank you so much for another wonderful class, and we are looking forward to part 2.
Yeah, because my favorite AI piece is still yet to come.